My father brought lilies every anniversary, all white and solemn. He believed they were her favorite, a tradition born from their wedding day. I never had the heart to tell him the truth. Mom once confided she had wanted morning glories, but Grandma Margaret insisted otherwise. As a child, I watched that quiet compromise become a silent wound. Yet over the years, those lilies became something more. They weren't her choice, but they became his language of love, and now, they sit beside her picture, every year. Dad never questioned the lilies. Every year, he'd say, just like she liked them, with a proud smile. Watching him, I felt a strange ache, like love and error dancing too close. Grandma Margaret always stood stiffly, arms crossed, never correcting him. Her silence was louder than truth. Mom's photo, framed in oak, always looked softer beside those flowers. I once asked her why she never said anything. She only smiled and said, "Some things are easier left as they are." I didn't understand. Not then. At Mom's memorial this year, I placed lilies beside her stone. Dad nodded approvingly, but as I turned to leave, a woman stopped me. Aunt June, Helen's sister. She said, "You know she actually hated lilies, right?" The words hit like cold water. I stared at the petals, unsure. "She wanted morning glories," June whispered. I felt my breath catch, a lifetime of false comfort. What else had we misunderstood in our grief? I asked Grandma Margaret that evening. She paused, then admitted, morning glories weren't elegant enough for a wedding. I felt anger rise how one choice silenced Mom's voice. She was disappointed, wasn't she? I asked. Margaret shrugged. She got over it. But did she? That night, I dug through old boxes and found a sketch Mom's bouquet. Soft blue blooms winding like vines. Morning glories, proof of a truth long buried under white petals. I showed Dad the sketch. He stared, unmoving. "She never said," he whispered. His voice cracked. "I thought lilies made her happy." I placed the paper in his hand. She chose silence, not agreement. His shoulders sagged, the weight of years pressing down. He looked at the vase on the table. "Then what have I been doing?" he asked. I reached out, "Loving her in your way." He closed his eyes. "I hope so." The next morning, the lilies were gone. In their place stood a vase of morning glories, freshly picked. Dad stood silently beside them. "She deserved this," he said softly. I nodded. "She did." Margaret walked in, frowning, but said nothing. For once, her silence felt small. Dad touched a petal, then whispered, "Maybe it's not too late to listen." And in that moment, grief turned tender. We began to rewrite her memory together. Now, every anniversary, Dad brings morning glories, not as correction, but as tribute. The lilies taught him devotion, the glories understanding. Margaret's influence faded with time. What remains is Helen's quiet strength, finally honored. I see it now. Truth doesn't erase love. It refines it. And in that simple bloom, a wound heals. It's not just memory. It's reconciliation. We gathered this year, family circling the garden where Helen once dreamed. Morning glories bloomed along the fence. Dad held one to his chest and whispered, for what she truly loved. I caught Grandma watching, her eyes moist. No protest, just silence that felt different, softer. We stood in stillness, not mourning, but finally seeing her clearly. That was love's truest gift.